With a loud sigh, she closed the door to the apartment behind her and let her back fall against it. 3 boxes, Lena thought, and couldn't help but smile to herself. It was getting better. The people were responding to her. Finally. Still, it didn't mean that it wasn't exhausting. She looked at the clock on her phone and sighed again, this time with even less enthusiasm. 30 minutes. That was all the time she had before she would have to record again. To get back in the groove. Lena kicked off her shoes and walked into the living room, which slowly but surely seemed to turn into a jungle. At least, if one were to ask some of her real-life friends, they would call it that. Every single wall was lined with pots and plants. At the moment she stepped in between them, all their different scents hit her almost at once. From the slightly earthy, almost spicy smell of her chrysanthemums, to the lemony scent of her orchid, a cymbidium golden elf. There were dozens of them, turning the normally drab white walls of her room into a vibrant display of colors and shapes. She turned and looked at each, one by one, then smiled. They all seemed healthy. Some were blooming already, while others were still waiting to fully wake up. Lena put down the 3 boxes on the small coffee table in the middle of the room, and pulled up the camera app on her phone and started taking photos. Her followers would love it. Not as much as when you pose with them, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her. But it was important that she kept them engaged. There's nothing worse than long periods without interaction. She had read somewhere when she had started this whole thing, and had long since learned the wisdom of those words. Lena kept smiling and taking photos. Her goldfish plant looked amazing today, she found, took a step closer and put it in focus. The orange flowers blooming between the dark green leaves almost made it look like a picture of an aquarium. Maybe she could do something with that. Put a glass frame in front of it, have Paul take some photos with his more professional camera, and then post it. It probably wouldn't get as much attention as if she was in the picture herself, but at least some of her fans would be delighted. Lena stopped smiling and put the phone back into her pocket. What was she doing right now? She had promised herself to stop mixing work with leisure. After coming home, she had 30 minutes of no work. And here she was again, taking photos and thinking about how to increase engagement, which was definitely part of work, not leisure. She needed to keep herself to it. Her therapist had told her as much. Lena turned her back to the plants and walked over to the small coffee table with the 3 boxes on it. She couldn't help but grin. Well, since they were from her fans, sent to a P.O. box, it could count as work, she thought, but shook her head immediately. No, opening them was definitely more in the leisure category than part of work, right? She wanted to know what they had sent her. Lena grabbed the biggest one and looked at the outside a bit closer. From a fan up north, she thought. Held it to her ear and started softly shaking it. There was something inside, something hard and a bit heavy. She put it down and opened it, finding inside a handwritten note and a wrapped porcelain figure. Lena couldn't stop smiling. The note was lovely. The little figurine would make a great addition to one of the pots that would be standing behind her when she recorded her next video. Lena grabbed the next box and looked at it more closely. No address of whoever had sent her this gift. She shook her head and opened it. Inside, she found randomly assorted garbage. One of those tiny, empty bottles, a few old newspapers, and cigarette butts. With a disgusted groan, she closed the box again and put it to the side. Yeah. That was part of interacting with other people as well, sadly. Some of them really didn't have anything better to do with their lives than annoy her. Well, whoever this person was, they had gone through the trouble of buying postage for this box. So at least they had wasted a bit of their own money as well. Lena tried to smile, then picked up the last and smallest package she had gotten. It was hardly bigger than her hand, and there was no address of the sender on there either. A bad feeling was building in her chest. She looked at it, turned it this way and that, then put it back onto the small table. Should she just toss it? Something inside of her seemed to push in that direction. What could be in there? More garbage? Something dangerous? Lena shook her head and then rolled her eyes. No, she shouldn't think like that, she told herself. Someone had gone through the trouble of sending her the box, so she could at least open it to have a look inside. Maybe she'd be surprised, and if it was garbage, she could still toss it. She cut the tape on it and carefully opened it, always ready to immediately throw it in the trash if some kind of strange smell reached her. But there wasn't. All she could see inside was a small plastic bag with a seed in it, and a note on the bottom. Have fun, it read. Lena furrowed her brow. She had never seen a seed like that. It was dark, but with a single silvery stripe running along its length. It didn't look like any of the ones she normally bought or found, and for a moment she wasn't sure if she should even plant it. What if it was something illegal, or even dangerous? No. She should be able to identify the plant once it started to grow, she told herself. Besides, maybe it could make a few interesting videos. Growing a mystery seed. People would love that, right? She put the note and the small plastic bag down on the dark coffee table and took a few photos of it. Everything for her fans, right? Lena's mood was improving as she took the second box with her to the kitchen and dumped it into the trash before getting a small pot, filling it with soil and then stopping for a moment again. There'd be no information about the seed on the note. She had no idea what kind of plant would come out of there. Would it need airy potting soil? Dry or wet? Would it grow better in the shade, or was it a plant that needed direct sunlight? There wasn't even an address or name on that package, so she couldn't ask the one who had sent her this thing. Well, Lena shrugged her shoulders. She would try and stay right down the middle, then watch the seed closely and adjust accordingly. With a bit of luck, it would still sprout, and once it did, she could find out what kind of plant it was. The mystery would continue until then. With a smile on her lips, she planted the seed and put the small pot close to the window before taking another picture. She could set up a camera in here from time to time to show her followers its progression, she thought. At least she wouldn't need to appear in a low-cut top again if that one took off. Lena turned and smiled, then looked at the time and finally left the living room behind to take care of the next video in the other room. She wasn't there when, not even 10 minutes later, Something small and green poked through the potted soil and found its way to the sunlight for the first time. Lena felt exhausted. It was like her mind was in a fog, and as she looked at the time, a groan escaped her. Hours had passed. How many repetitions had she gone through? Dozens? And all of that just to get one good video out of it. The orchid in the pot at her side looked sad now as well, she thought, and sighed. She still needed to cut the video, edit it, make sure the audio was good enough, and finally watch it once more to be certain she hadn't missed anything. Hours upon hours of more work. She groaned and let her head fall back. It was exhausting and frightening, doing something like this without any real direction from outside. Yeah, she could look at the comments below her other videos to try and get a feel for what she should do next. But more often than not, those ideas her fans posted turned to complete shit. Was it because they demanded too much from her? Well, they were the people who indirectly paid her bills, so listening to their voices would be prudent. Then, on the other hand, quite a few of them would probably be happy if she just stood in front of the camera silently for 15 minutes, maybe bending over once or twice. Lena let out a loud sigh. She wouldn't get to editing the video today. She already knew. But that didn't mean that her work was done. At least she could post the pictures of the gifts on her social media channel. A few people might see it and send her stuff as well. Finally, a slight smile appeared on her face again. She pulled up her phone and started posting the images, all with appropriate captions and small texts below, thanking the people and making sure her followers knew how appreciative she was. All in all, it took her another half hour to make sure every post got linked to everything else, before she could finally put down her phone and slink back in the big office chair she used for her editing work. Maybe she should try starting now? Lena groaned, looked at the window, and could see that the sun had already sunk down. Where had the time gone? Well, it wasn't like she had to stick to a schedule. Yet still, her exhaustion was sucking out all the motivation she had felt beforehand. Lena pulled off her headphones and stood up, stretching her arms, legs, and shoulders. What she needed right now was a shower, and then her own comfy bed. If she got up early tomorrow, she could still upload the video that evening. She nodded at herself, then took a deep breath and walked through the small room she had turned into a recording studio. In all probability, she wouldn't leave this room tomorrow at all, except for toilet breaks and to eat. Lena looked at the few plants she had in there as she reached out for the handle of the door. Her most colorful ones, and one interesting young sprout of a jade plant, standing right by the window. Maybe she could get her goldfish plant a spot in here as well. It did look stunning, after all. With a smile, she opened the door and crossed the living room, only to freeze the moment she reached the center. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see the small pot she had filled up not even 5 hours ago. There was something there already. Lena turned and ran to the place where she had put the thing down. A seedling. What the actual fuck? No, it was even more ominous than that. It had already lost its first 2 leaves and was growing up. She grabbed hold of the pot and lifted it up. a dark stem with dark buds. The small plant was already almost 2 hands high, and it looked like a vine. Lena could hardly believe her eyes. Was that some kind of bamboo or the like? It was growing far too quickly. She touched the soil and found it completely dried out. Was it sucking all the nutrients out of the earth as well? What kind of plant was that? It had to be from some jungle, right? She took a few pictures, then sat the pot down and watered it again. Lena cursed, yet smiled as she looked at the thing between her other plants. If it continued to grow at that rate, it would soon overshadow all the rest. Maybe she could give it something to cling to tomorrow? She smiled again, then yawned, shook her head and turned away. A hot shower and a bed, Lena told herself. The plants would still be there tomorrow. Smiling and humming, she walked to the bathroom, and as she threw the door shut, a small sprout broke out of the ceiling's dark bud. Lena woke up at the sound of her alarm and could hardly believe the strange dreams she'd had. Slowly, she rolled out of bed, still shaking her head as she half remembered the feeling of abject terror she had just escaped. A groan came out of her mouth, and her feet touched the floor. Something was up with her, she knew. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe she had developed a fever overnight. She always dreamed of weird stuff when that happened. But today, the nightmares had seemed far more threatening and fleeting. Lena shook her head again as she stretched herself, then closed her eyes and took deep breaths while she counted to 10. First, coffee. Then she could get ready for the day, she told herself, as she opened her eyes and felt the sleep slowly losing its grip on her. She was still drowsy, especially before the coffee, but at least now she could enjoy it in the comfort of her own home and didn't have to stress to get out of the door in time. Lena entered the kitchen and let her body work on autopilot. The movements to brew a cup with her old machine were so well ingrained that she could do it pretty much in her sleep, which she almost had on many days. She sighed and steadied herself on the counter, waiting for the noise the machine would make once the coffee started brewing. Cutting, editing, maybe a bit of voiceover. Much to do for today, she told herself in her mind. The cup in front of her started to fill up as the smell of coffee permeated the air. Lena felt a smile coming over her lips and gave herself a moment of quiet peace as she breathed in and out in a steady rhythm. She could drink her coffee without worrying about the time, get ready, and start her day in earnest after. The sun was just coming up, so she had time. Finally, the machine stopped making noise. Lena snatched her cup as if it was in danger of being stolen. With a slight grin on her face, she turned around to walk toward the living room. The light outside was getting stronger. Soon, the first rays of the sun would enter her apartment and make the flowers glow. She got herself together in the next 20 minutes or so. She could take a few photos of that idyllic moment. People loved that kind of stuff. She smiled and entered the living room, then stopped suddenly as she noticed her plants, especially those back in the corner, close to the window. Lena rubbed her eyes and almost staggered. The small seed she had planted yesterday had grown during the night as well. It was no longer a tiny sprout, but now looked like a beanstalk, reaching up and over to the side. Lena walked over to the small coffee table to set down her cup so she could have both hands free. There was something about that plant that made her uneasy. The stalk disappeared between the big leaves of the Monstera, which now hung far less lively compared to yesterday. She reached the spot in a second, carefully pushed away the wide leaves of one of her biggest plants, and drew in a sharp breath. That stalk! It had wrapped itself around the Monstera stem, but it hadn't coiled upwards, but down. Instead of looking for the sun, it had raced toward the ground. Lena pushed more and more of the leaves to the side while she moved down. How far had it come? She already knew deep in her heart, but still wanted to see. The stalk coiled itself round and round around the stem until it reached the pot, then disappeared beneath the earth. Lena couldn't remember ever having heard of anything like that. The size of that mystery plant was definitely too big for its tiny pot, but normally that should stunt their growth, or in the worst case lead to them dying. She pushed her finger into the Monstera's pot. It was dry. This mystery plant really had branched out to find more earth to grow in, and more water to drink. A strange feeling came over her. What should she do? Maybe she could carefully uncoil the stem and stalk to separate them again. She pushed her finger deeper into the earth in the pot and wiped it away before taking another deep breath. There were roots in the Monstera's pot, ones that didn't belong to the Monstera itself. What the hell? Lena snapped some photos, then brushed her finger over the stem to try and pull away the stalk at least a tiny bit. It didn't move. They were completely intertwined, but there was also something wrong with the mysterious stalk. She used her phone as a flashlight to take a closer look, and found it immediately. Everywhere the two plants touched, there were small, root-like protrusions coming out of the stalk, growing into the stem. Lena cursed. There was no way she could separate them without killing the Monstera now. As far as she could see, its stem was covered in tiny holes. She gave off another groan. How many years had it been since she had gotten that plant? 4? Maybe 5? It had been her pride and joy when she had started her channel. And now, it would die. Lena couldn't let that happen. She walked over to the small watering can and poured more water, first into the Monstera's pot, then the mystery plants. If she gave this thing enough to drink on its own, maybe it would let go of the other one. There wasn't much else she could do, right? Lena took another photo and stepped back. It almost looked beautiful, she thought, in a very disturbing kind of way. That mystery plant had searched for help and had found her Monstera. She would definitely need to repot it. Lena caught a glimpse of her phone and sighed. She didn't have time for that right now. First, she needed to cut and edit the episode. It had to be uploaded today if she wanted to stick to the schedule. Well, it couldn't get much worse, right? The Monstera probably wouldn't survive this anyway. Only if that mystery plant let go of it on its own. Lena turned away, the coffee still sitting on the small table, now completely out of her mind. She didn't feel tired anymore, at least, she thought as she entered her studio. And all the while, the mystery plant kept moving. Slowly, to a human, but terrifyingly fast for a plant. Its offshoots were still growing. And not even a minute after she had left, the first one broke out of the Monstera and reached out to the next thing it could find. Lena scooted back on her chair and let out a short groan. This was bullshit. Whatever she did, it just didn't feel right. There was no flow in the video, no underlying thread she could follow. Even if she cut out the superfluous stuff and rearranged the scenes, she didn't feel like her message was coming across. It was frustrating, annoying. And all the while, in the back of her head, Lena still couldn't stop thinking about that damned mystery plant. She was distracted, and she couldn't deny it any longer. Her quality was suffering, and she already felt like a failure. Lena let her head sink onto the desk and looked over at the window where the plant stood. Why couldn't humans be more like them? Happy with what they got, content with light, water, and peace and quiet. But no, they always demanded more and more and more. She groaned again. Maybe she should stop and take a break. Half an hour of not working now might actually help her in the long run. Maybe she would feel more motivated if she first took care of her plants. Either save the Monstera, or at least prune that mystery thing a bit. She'd feel far less annoyed, Lena promised herself, which would definitely improve her mood and the quality of her work. With a sigh, she scooted back and pulled off her headphones. Yeah, sometimes taking a break was the right choice. Lena stood up and looked around. The studio was lovely, but maybe a bit of a change-up was in order. She could switch out a few of the plants, maybe even rearrange the furniture. But only after she had uploaded the episode. That had to come first. She couldn't continue procrastinating forever. Lena turned and walked toward the door. She had to keep her rhythm if she wanted to succeed. Her hand touched the handle, and Lena froze. With a part of her still in work mode, she could hear something that sounded like background noise. A strange sound, like someone was rustling or shuffling around in her living room with her plants. She pulled open the door, ready to scream at whoever had come into her space uninvited, but a voice caught in her throat when she looked out and saw nothing. No one was there, but some of the leaves on her plants were still moving. Lena looked back and grabbed the first thing she could for a weapon. A pair of old scissors she hadn't put away in days. Slowly, she inched forward. The noise of something or someone shuffling the leaves still kept her on. With the weapon in hand, she rounded the corner to look at the whole room. Lena saw the cup she had left completely full on the small table, her furniture, and even the TV set. Nothing had been stolen. She looked around once more and at the front door of her apartment. The key was still in the lock, and it hadn't been opened either. Maybe she was just growing paranoid. She tried to relax, but that strange noise was still in the air. With the weapon in hand, she walked on. Something had changed in the room. It felt darker, far more ominous. Lena took a deep breath and smelled a new, almost oily scent, and her eyes fell upon the strange mystery plant. Had it grown again? She wasn't sure. The main sprout was still sticking out like a vine, wandering over to the Monstera. the hell? That thing had changed. She could see a difference in and between its giant leaves. They had multiplied, but the new ones seemed strangely dark, with a single silvery stripe across them. Lena stepped closer and touched one of them with the tip of her scissors. They even felt wrong, far too rigid to be a real Monstera. Was that the mystery plant? She looked closely and could see the stem of the leaves coming from either the vine or the Monstera itself. But they had grown wrong. It looked like they were burrowing into the stem, making big holes in the plant that now seemed a shade more grey than before. Lena bristled at the thought, raised her eyes, and could see a new vine breaking out of the Monstera, reaching over to the next plant. "No!" she hissed, as her gaze followed that offshoot. It was disappearing behind the foliage. She pushed it aside and could see it reaching into the middle of her snake plant. There were dark leaves sprouting from it already, ones that hadn't been there before, ones that showed the same bright stripe as the fake Monstera leaves. What the hell was going on here? Lena could see another vine reaching out from the snake plant and over to her philodendron. This thing was killing everything. She reached out and grabbed the vine to pull it off. A hot, searing pain shot up her arm as something pierced the skin of her palm. Lena howled and tried to pull her hand back, but this thing seemed stuck to it. With a cry, she brought down the scissors to slash at the vine. Dark green liquid shot out of the cut. The air got filled with this oily stench. Lena retched as she tumbled backward, tried to tear back her hand that still held onto the vine, and heard 2 plant pots tumbling over. Leaves were coming toward her as she screamed and fell, pulling along her houseplants. Between the normal leaves, she could see darker variations. It had infected them already. This part of her mind warned her. Everything it touched would get taken over. Lena screamed in pain as the cut-off piece of vine inside her palm started moving. She could feel it under her skin. A sensation made her almost retch again. She rolled over, came to her feet, and only then realized that the piece of vine she had cut off was coiling around her hand. The pressure was getting more intense. Lena pulled in her hand and heard more pots tumbling. It had grown into the wall already. She ripped at the vine, kept it taut, then brought down the scissors again and fell back as she finally cut the other end off. The piece in her hand started thrashing. It was moving like an animal, piercing her skin even deeper as she howled and cried and scooted back, now looking at the mess of plants in front of her. Dark and green leaves were everywhere. This jumbled mess seemed to pulsate as the cut-off vine bled out this oily substance all over the floor. Lena cried out again. She couldn't open her hand anymore, and the pain was getting worse and worse. Her fingers had started to turn purple already, and deep inside her skin, she could feel something moving, burrowing through her flesh. Lena dropped the scissors to hold onto her wounded hand. Blood was mixing with that oily substance and dripping onto the floor now. A movement in front of her suddenly made her stop. She could see something in the chaos of her fallen plants along one of the thicker vines. It was half covered by a dark snake plant leaf, but she suddenly had this urge to not look away. She hadn't seen it fully the first time, but her instincts warned her not to miss it again. There, between the earth and leaves, she now saw it clearly. The vine there was opening ever so slowly, and beneath its outer layer, Lena saw something staring back at her. An eye. It had the same color as hers. The pupil constricted, then grew again before slowly moving from side to side until it found her. There, it stopped. She couldn't take it anymore. With another scream, Lena jumped up from the floor and ran toward the entrance. Howling, she ripped open the door and stumbled outside. One of the neighbors was already standing there, looking at her with a fearful expression on his face. Lena screamed at him to call an ambulance. As deep inside her hand, the roots finally reached the bone. She raced down the hallway, out of her mind with fear and pain, while inside her apartment, new vines already started to sprout.